So I think probably point one for me that I learned my first semester at UC Berkeley was the importance of social support. And what I mean by this is make sure that you have friends and family and people that you can go to for academic and personal help or emotional help. These classes are going to be very intense, the workloads are going to be a lot, and there's going to be a lot of times where you just kind of want to give up and you tell yourself that you're not good enough. And, I remember vividly my first day after class at UC Berkeley. I was just sitting at a table with two of my friends, and we were talking about how unlikely it was that we would ever graduate as chemical engineers because it just didn't make any sense because everything just seemed so daunting. And having that group of people around you to tell you that you are good enough and you need to keep going, and I'm here to tell you that I believe that you can do it too, is probably the most important thing that will come out of your time at UC Berkeley or college or anything you do in life. I think that is the most important part. I would say also make sure that you are honest with yourself to other people who are close to you. And what I mean by that is acknowledge your shortcomings and also acknowledge your strengths. Know what you bring to the table and know that you are there for a reason. And the academic counselors or whoever the admissions counselors who looked at your personal statement and your academic performance believe that you have what it takes to make it through. And even if you don't believe in yourself, know that that admissions counselor did, your professors do, your GSIs do, your TAs do, your friends do. So you have a whole bunch of people around you who do believe that you can make it through, and you do bring strengths to the table too. Because I'm someone who's guilty of beating myself up about my shortcomings, and so having people around you to remind you that you make up for whatever shortcomings you might think you have in other ways is extremely important. Point two that I wanted to make here is to make sure that you maintain a work-life balance. And this is something that you'll struggle with not only at UC Berkeley or college, but in work after college. And so for me, that meant having very structured study time and then time to just do things that I wanted to do with my life, like riding my bike or gardening. So to give an example of what I would do, I would generally try to make or give myself 3 hours-ish each day to read through the textbooks, review my lecture notes, talk with GSIs or the professor, and I found that I could probably do 90% of what I wanted to do within that 3-hour block. And then afterwards I would do something like ride my bike and spend time with my family or my friends, just that every day I could feel like I was still living my life and not just burning myself out in school. And I've seen a lot of my friends kind of burn out because they'll spend way too much time studying and being a quasi-economist. I do believe strongly in the law of diminishing marginal returns. So the more time you put into studying, the less return you get on your investment. So just 3 hours I think is enough to really get kind of 90% out of a day in terms of the material that you are learning as an undergrad. So it also depends on the person too, but for me I think 3 hours was enough, and I'm not including the lectures and all the commuting and all that, I was riding my bike to school, but whatever. So basically make sure you have a life outside of school so that you don't burn out. Point three here is also just, and this is easier said than done too, make sure that you have a positive mindset, and this is going to take practice. And what I'm trying to say is basically don't feel bad if you don't score as well as you think you should or could have. It's very easy to do, and a lot of people do it, and the issue with that is it's not very productive to do it. And what I mean by that is, after my first semester at UC Berkeley, I looked at the grades I got on the midterms and the finals, and I realized, or I felt that if I had worked harder, so let's say I studied 10 hours for a midterm, and I would look at how I did on the midterm, and I would say, like, if I worked 20 hours instead of 10 hours, I honestly wouldn't have done that much better. Or I would look at the questions that I got wrong, and I would have thought, was I really going to, in that additional 10 hours of studying that I would have done, would I have studied this material? And often the answer was no. So, figuring out what works for you, how hard you need to work on a class, and what is the low-hanging fruit, and then also just knowing that your time is finite and you will not always get returns on your investment in terms of the time that you put into a class. So maybe you'll spend all your time trying to do mass balances, but your whole final is going to be mostly energy balances. And while they are related, they're not direct overlap. So it's like, just kind of try to figure out. And the reason why lectures are so important is because at Berkeley, at least, it gives you a feel for what does this professor care about? Why are they deciding to spend 80% of their lecture time talking about energy balances? So maybe that's what you should be studying for the midterm, and just, kind of looking at it from that perspective. So, yeah. And then also kind of in the similar vein to giving yourself a more positive mindset, I would say, and remember this, you don't have to be best to win. What I mean by that is, like, you don't have to be valedictorian to be the best student in your class. This all has to do with your mindset. If you can learn to be okay with getting whatever grade you get on a midterm or a final, then I think you're going to go very, very far. The people who don't go far are the people who think, if I didn't score as high as I think I should have, then I'm not doing good enough. I need to work harder. And it just turns into this very ugly positive feedback loop, because if you're at UC Berkeley already, you've already worked very hard and you're already working quite hard. So I would think that, or I would argue that you don't really need to work much harder. Just do your best and be okay with what happens and keep going is the main message that I'm trying to hit home here. And then another thing is, worrying about your GPA endlessly. I'm here to say, as someone who's already graduated, employers don't really care about your GPA. A lot of people don't even report their GPAs after they graduated. Your GPA is really just a number. That's all it is. And if you burn yourself out trying to get a little few points higher on higher GPA number, that's not what I would recommend. I think that you should focus more on just trying to enjoy life and the things I've mentioned previously in this video. And then, I think, if you have been accepted to UC Berkeley, you can make it through. And also, to people who weren't accepted to UC Berkeley, that doesn't mean that you were not good enough to make it through. Luck plays a huge role in a lot of these admission decisions, and I know it hurts a lot to get rejected, because I was rejected when I was in high school from UC Berkeley. And, getting in and knowing that someone saw something in me and my family said, I can do it, and I had friends supporting me, and I was able to get through, was kind of the most meaningful thing to come out of this whole experience. So basically, to wrap things up, make sure you have a support network, friends, family, your peers, have a life outside of school. Make sure you do fun things on the weekends and after class. Make sure you have a positive mindset. Try not to beat yourself up if you don't do as good as you think you could. And just, know that you don't have to be best to win. You can still you will live a very meaningful life, even if you don't get as high a grade as you could have at UC Berkeley, because it's just a grade, and these are just numbers. And your life is a lot more than just numbers and letters. And so I hope this video helps people who are considering going to UC Berkeley, or are about to. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you all for watching.